Hey, it's Rick. Welcome. I hope everybody's doing well. I've got a little bit of a cold today, so my voice is going to sound a little bit off, but hopefully it's not too bad. Today I'm going to show you how I went through the steps to create this painting. A friend of mine had a baby here about 1.5 years ago, and she's big into Winnie the Pooh, so I told her that for Christmas I would create her a painting of the baby and Winnie the Pooh character. So I started doing thumbnail sketches just to block out the basic shapes in my sketchbook, and then I moved on to reference material and drawing stuff out on tracing paper. Now, I do that on tracing paper because it allows me to retrace and sort of move elements around, kind of the way you would digitally, and just get stuff in the right position. Once that was finished and I got it onto tracing paper, I used I got like an $80 LED projector I got from Amazon. I used that to transfer down to the board. Now, the surface of this board is actually a piece of masonite with a piece of Arches watercolor paper mounted to it with contact cement. I, in hindsight, probably shouldn't have used this particular paper. It is a little bit too textured, but I was planning on doing this with watercolor originally. I just changed my mind at the last minute to do airbrush. So what would happen with this texture is as I was airbrush spraying, the overspray would drift and hit all the ridges of the paper, all the textured parts, and just made this really nasty pattern, so I had to go back and correct a lot of times. It was especially problematic on the background because that was entirely freehand sprayed, so there was no masking. Normally I prefer to work with airbrush on like a smooth illustration board, but this particular time I didn't have any in the size that I needed, so I thought this would be the best way to go. The paint I'm using for this is a Holbein acrylic gouache. It's not really gouache. Real gouache is water soluble when dry and has gum arabic as a binder. This is just an acrylic that is really opaque and really matte when it dries, and I like those two qualities, especially for airbrushing. If you're going to have to thin the paint down as you do to airbrush, I like it to be really opaque. I don't like to have to paint a lot of coats. Kind of lazy like that. And that's why I prefer, like the airbrush you just seen is a TimberTech. I buy them on Amazon. I've got about 3 or 4 of them now. You get them for like $40, but they've got 3 different nozzles, but the biggest one is 0.8 millimeter, and that's the one I keep them loaded with all the time. So I can fill my backgrounds in very quickly with very thick paint. And then what I'll do is come in with the Pache Turbo to create all the detail work. The Turbo is a great airbrush. I think they discontinued them. I read somewhere in the 1980s, like the late 80s. I bought the 2 that I have in the early 1990s, and they've been fantastic. Maximum pattern width on this is about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, so it's really only for fine work. You're not going to be doing any backgrounds, and you can see that tiny little color cup only holds a few drops at a time. If you try to put more in there, it tends to spill out all over the work, so not recommended. The downside of the Turbo is that it does whine like a dentist drill the entire time you're using it. So it can get on the nerves depending on who you are. It's never bothered me, but I have had people come over while I was working and they're like, man, I can't stand that sound. Now, if you find you are spraying and your spray comes out a little bit grainy, chances are either your paint's too thick or your air pressure is too low. You kind of have to find a happy sweet spot there. If you crank the air pressure up too high, the problem is you get little spider legs sort of thing. Like too much paint comes out and then the air just blows it across the surface of the board and it looks pretty bad. So you have to find an air pressure that works for you but works within the viscosity of paint you've got. If your paint's too thick, you've really got to crank the pressure up. You can turn it down if you thin your paint really thin, but then you've got to do a lot of coats. These characters, back in the day in the 1960s when they did the short films, the original drawings, I guess, or versions of them, they were different than they are now. The new promotional material is very Disney-esque. They've done a lot of stuff. They've changed, for example, on Tigger, they made his nose a lighter pink. They seem to have gotten rid of the whiskers. They made the stripes more of a zigzag, sketchy thing than a solid triangle. They made Eeyore blue instead of gray, which I think is kind of weird, but I mean, I get it. Making the colors more vibrant really makes them more attractive to children who want to buy the product. Well, want their parents to buy the product, so there's more money to be made by making things more vibrant. But I prefer the classic version, so I'm going to be painting Eeyore in gray and trying to keep sort of halfway between the old stuff and the new stuff. I do like what they're doing with the newer line work. Like the old lines were just straight black, like traditional animation would be. The new promotional stuff, they've used colored line work around the outside, and I decided to go with that because I found the black would have been just too intense, too much black. There really isn't very much in the rest of the image, and I think the outlines would have just detracted from it, or distracted people. I still had to do the line work anyway, though, because originally I thought I was going to do it, and then I got to this part and thought, maybe I won't do the lines, I'll just leave it like this. But unfortunately, I'm getting older and my eyesight's not that great, and the frisket, if you don't put it back exactly in the right spot and you spray the next color, you get these white lines where the board shows through, and I've got quite a bit of that in a few spots. So airbrushing is not for older people. You better get ready to get really close or get yourself some good bifocals, because it's all about the cutting. You've got to be really precise to hit those cut lines. The background line work here, the pencil work, I'm just cleaning up with a bit of a soft kneadable eraser. When I put the line work down with a 0.2 mechanical pencil, I guess I thought it was light, but looking at it after I started airbrushing, I'm realizing, you know what, you can still see it through some of the airbrush, so I did have to come back towards the end and give everything in the background sort of an extra layer in spots, just to cover that pencil up. It wasn't too noticeable, but still, I didn't like it poking through. The entire background here is freehand. At least the part north of the horizon line, all the background flowers and fence and stuff. I wanted this background to seem like in and out of focus. So there's going to be parts down towards the bottom where I create sharper blades of grass with a paintbrush, but for the background it's all freehand. And this is where, especially with the dark green, you can see some of that pattern showing up on the unpainted parts of the paper. It's really hitting all those high textures and leaving this nasty sort of pattern that I had to come back in after and hit it with white again. So I've masked off all the characters with fresh masking. I go through a fair amount of frisket for this. Once it gets covered in overspray, it's kind of hard to see what you're doing, so it kind of defeats the purpose. I guess you could try cleaning it off, but in the past when I've done that, I mean, if you use anything like alcohol, there's a chance it gets underneath and ruins the work, so you better just to throw it away. This stuff has gotten quite expensive in recent years. I used to buy it for a hell of a lot cheaper than it is now. Now this background, because I want it in and out of focus, I've got to create all the shadows first. Kind of like, you know, if you were just like painting this with a paintbrush. Have you ever watched, there's a guy on YouTube, Michael James Smith. He does a lot of scenery and stuff with oil painting. He's really good at it. The stuff is amazing. But yeah, you paint all the shadows in first, and then you come over top with your actual blades of grass. So some of them have to be done with the turbo because they're supposed to be out of focus. This is a bit painful to do. If you don't mix the paint thin enough, it does get quite grainy. But then if you do mix it thin enough, you've got to go over every single stroke multiple times just to make it opaque. So everything in the front has got this, you know, out of focus grass blades, and then I added a little bit of a highlight color just to make it look like it's shining off individual pieces. And then that bit in the middle is all going to be done with a paintbrush. You could spend a lot of time blending or feathering that effect, like I guess you would have to maybe at the point where it goes from perfectly sharp blades to less sharp blades, you'd maybe have to create a stencil and lift it up off of the surface, maybe like, you know, a millimeter, so when you spray through it, you get a very slight soft edge instead of a hard soft edge. But that is a lot of work I did not want to get into for this. The grass blades over the characters are just painted on with a paintbrush, and then the shadow work is done with an airbrush. Once this part is all done, I can peel all that off. I tend to use pieces of paper a lot just to roughly mask off large sections because it is a lot cheaper than frisket. If you're new to airbrushing, know that there is a difference between airbrush frisket and the newer stencil vinyl. Personal vinyl cutters like the Cricut and the Silhouette are a fairly new invention, and the vinyls they've come out with for those things are extremely tacky. Like their stencil vinyl is considered to be low tack, but their full tack stencil, their full tack vinyl is permanent. Like you're supposed to put it on and it never comes off, and it's made for metal surfaces like vehicles and glass and stuff. So the temporary stuff is still so tacky it will destroy any surface you stick it to if it's made of paper or something. So you have to specifically get airbrush frisket for this. Now there is a couple of different kinds. There is a low tack airbrush frisket. I don't recommend that stuff at all because it's so low tack you'll find the airbrush literally blows it off the board. And it's, again, so low tack that what will happen is your paint will happily creep up underneath it. It doesn't really create a good seal. Even with this stuff, there was a few times I had to go around with my finger because you're getting too close with the airbrush and it's starting to lift the corner, and you've really got to go down and press it down harder just to make sure it doesn't come up on you. The worst thing you can get is when you're done something, you think you're done, you peel the frisket and realize it's sprayed underneath, and now you've got to go back and correct another part of the painting. That sort of touch-up is a real pain. You're trying to color match, and if you put the paint on transparently, he's going to have a really hard time covering it with an opaque color. I didn't do too much filming of the face for this, and there's a reason for that. Again, as you get older, your eyesight's not so great. I found that I had to get in so close. There just wasn't enough room for my fat head and the camera at the same time. So it was one or the other. So I only, filmed a little bit of it, and then I just turned the camera off and did the rest myself. The edges of the board are sealed with a Holbein soft tape, which is a pretty awesome stuff. It's got a very sort of nice adhesive onto it. It doesn't leave any residue, and it really goes over even rough surfaces and seals them completely so that when you do peel it off, it doesn't leave, there's no bleed underneath or anything. Some people like painter's tape, and I have used that in the past, but I don't like the color. I find it extremely distracting, especially when you're trying to color match stuff. It really throws me off, having that bright green or blue. So I prefer something white or clear or as pale as possible. And that's what this Holbein soft tape is. You can get it at various art stores. I think it's called Nitto Tape. That's officially who makes it, a Japanese tape company, but they make a lot of different tapes, so you can't just look for Nitto Tape. You're likely to find duct tape or electrical tape or something else. This is specifically called Holbein soft tape. So here I'm putting in the line work. Again, like I said, kind of in between. It's a older color for characters, but a new sort of color line work instead of just being black. I find these, they look pretty good and they don't detract. The only black stuff in this painting is really the baby's eyes and the character's eyes, nose, and Eeyore's mane, and that's about it. And even that I went back in with some spray afterwards and sort of added a little more work to it and lightened it up a bit so it wouldn't be so much of a competition for the darkness. You want the baby's face to be the focal point of the image. Obviously, that's the point. As always, I hope this painting, this video, has been inspirational to someone. If you're out there and you're thinking about painting, get into it. Just go for it. You don't have to buy expensive supplies. You can get cheap airbrushes now on Amazon for like $12, although I don't think I'd recommend them. I'd, probably buy the $30 or $40 one. The TimberTech has been great. I love them. But you don't even need to airbrush. Just go to the dollar store, get some craft paints, and just start painting. There's tons of stuff at the dollar store. Canvases and paints and brushes and stuff. It doesn't have to be great, because realize your first, probably 100 or more, they're going to suck. You're not going to be good right out of the gate. Nobody is. That's just how it is. So yeah, hopefully you've liked the video. If you've got any questions or anything, certainly leave them in the comments below, and I'll answer what I can. But yeah, don't forget to hit all your buttons on the way out, and thanks for watching.